The minister's cup of coffee truly amazed him when he tasted it. Rich, sweet, and aromatic, it was indeed the flavor of coffee. "How did you manage to do that?" he asked, his demeanor no longer as irritable as when he arrived. "By roasting the roots of curly kale in a pan, then grinding them into powder, it can be used as a substitute for coffee. Of course, the flavor still differs from real coffee, so I found a way to create a taste close to the real thing." The Minister of the Interior held the coffee cup, contemplating. So that's it, he thought about the recent decree banning communication with speculators that the emperor had just issued. He had just finished talking to her. The minister's frightened expression made Hazel laugh. She reassured him not to worry. She held her straw hat, which could help them circumvent the ban on communication. He smiled, feeling somewhat satisfied, sat down, and raised the coffee cup to continue enjoying it. The long-standing addiction finally satisfied the minister. He said, "Indeed, I'm addicted to coffee." With the enormous workload in the palace and the responsibilities of a Minister of the Interior, I always needed to stay alert. Coffee helps me recover, and I can drink 7 to 8 cups a day. Until I had health problems with it, my heart pounding, stomach pains, and dizziness. The doctor forbade me from drinking it if I didn't want to continue staying in the hospital. And since then, I had to stop drinking it. It was so distressing, to the point that everyone around knew about it and hid it whenever they saw me. It was really a wound. While listening to his brief story, Hazel poured some more coffee from curly kale for him. He was delighted and touched as he expressed his appreciation for the coffee Hazel gave him. It made him feel comfortable, satisfying his craving for coffee every day. Indeed, Hazel, the herbalist, explained to him about the benefits of curly kale, which helps strengthen the intestines and improve digestion. It's a coffee for the common people, discovered by farmers, as they couldn't afford expensive things like real coffee. "Oh, so it's not a gift from nature?" the minister marveled. Creating powder from curly kale requires many steps, he knew that. And he knew that the young girl had to work hard all evening to make it. "Do you want to surprise me with this truth?" the minister joked. "Are you upset when I said farming is useless?" No, Hazel said her intention wasn't like that. Of course, she felt uncomfortable being insulted about her farming work, but she had forgotten about it. The reason Hazel stayed up late and prepared this gift was because he was a guest of Marioneer Farm, the first guest, so she tried to treat him with something he liked. Hazel said she did it because she liked it. She truly enjoyed farming. She shared that a few days ago she was quite annoyed with the manager for ruining her calculations, but now she's too happy. And as the owner of the farm, Hazel would treat the minister with another gift, wild strawberry cake. Eating it with coffee is always great. I don't think anyone looking at this beautiful cake could refuse, especially with the invitation from such a lovely hostess. The minister hesitated. He was quite picky, and didn't like sweet things. However, after the first bite, to please the young hostess, he was convinced by its taste. As Hazel's grandfather said in the previous episode, no one can refuse Hazel's strawberry cake. It's not too sweet, it's a natural sweetness. He asked about the spices she added. Perhaps she didn't add sugar or anything else. That's right, Hazel laughed and confirmed, it was already sweet, so why add sugar? She revealed where she got these strawberries. It was from the king's garden. That surprised the minister even more, as it turned out that there were such edible fruits in the king's garden. He thought, ate, then thought again, ate again, and thought while eating. In total, he thought 3 times until he was full. His stomach full and healthy, after years of coffee addiction, the minister finally smiled in the friendliest way possible, and could calmly talk to this humble farmer. Hazel respectfully said, I hope you can listen to me carefully. I will explain about the ownership of this land, and furthermore, I don't want to sell it at a high price. I truly want to farm here. In anticipation, Hazel thought of a rejection, but in response to that concern, he just said, I understand. Surprisingly, Hazel thought. The minister was quite embarrassed for misunderstanding the purpose of this landowner's use. He bid her farewell and left. Or rather bid farewell to the straw hat. In the joy of satisfying the first guest, Hazel gave him some gifts she had prepared. He stepped out the door, full of anxiety about the failure of his conquest, his hands full of gifts. 2 guards called out to him, "Sir Albert?" They were quite surprised that he called them to follow without any apparent reason. Dismissed, his voice full of enthusiasm. He passed by them, and the taste of coffee was noticed by one of his close aides. Did he drink it? If so, it would be a big disaster for him. But contrary to that worry, the minister was quite comfortable, not looking tired at all. He exclaimed, "Perfect." This made the aide curious. "He's talking about the newspaper he just read, right?" "No, of course not, I'm talking about the cake." No, he didn't mishear. He's talking about the cake on the table, the wild strawberry cake. He had never seen that kind before. Sir Albert crossed his arms seriously and said, "Do you know, in the Emperor's garden, there are many wild strawberries like this?" He didn't know that. Apparently, the miraculous coffee cup made the minister feel so comfortable that he decided to praise the young man in front of him, something unprecedented. He made a momentous decision, after almost memorizing the law book on the table. There would be no cleaning today. He had found something important from that book. Wonderful. His relaxed face looked as if he had found money to repay a debt. He enthusiastically said, "There will be a new breeze in the palace soon." In front of her house this morning, the farm owner opened the door and received a wicker basket and a letter. The content was as follows: "On behalf of the Ministry of the Interior, I, Count Lysander Albert, send to Straw Hat." The lengthy content of the letter took Hazel a few minutes to understand, then she joyfully ran around, proudly sharing the news with everyone she met. Although personal ownership did not exist in the palace, there was one exception: the ownership of the salons by noble ladies, to diversify the palace culture, decided by King Ramstein II and enshrined in law, so no one could expel Hazel from her salon. Hazel shared this information with 2 unfamiliar girls, telling them that although the king had forbidden them to talk to her, they could still communicate with her through the announcement from the Ministry of the Interior. With a heart full of joy, she made the 2 strangers couldn't help but be surprised. They could talk to her through her straw hat. So, a salon had been legally established, Mariamere Farm. The next morning, the king woke up as the sunlight shone into the room. He had the habit of waking up early every day, putting on his robe, enjoying the tranquility of the early morning, which brought him a sense of relief. And this handsome figure reached out to open the door of the room, stepped onto the balcony. Suddenly the joy disappeared. Fuck, some kind of awful smell hit his nose. The emperor rang the bell to call the attendants. "What is that?" the emperor asked, and the aide replied that it was manure, fertilizer. No, the emperor knew it was manure. What he meant was, where did it come from? The emperor asked about the fence surrounding the soon-to-be-cleared land. But it had been cleared since yesterday by order of the Ministry of the Interior. Something was wrong. The king needed to meet Sir Albert immediately. And he always knew what the king needed, so he was already there. With a sheepish look, he smiled and explained that it seemed someone had opened a salon in the royal area. The emperor was informed that about 2,000 years ago, during the reign of King Ramstein II, there was such a law. And a noble lady could open a salon in the royal area with the same authority as a queen within her salon. Of course, this shocked the emperor, while the Minister of the Interior might enjoy his delicious coffee. He tried to pretend it was a mistake and apologized to the emperor for his incompetence, filled with joy inside. However, that cunning look of Sir Albert made the emperor suspicious. He just laughed and immediately made an excuse to leave. The emperor went crazy, coldly took out an arrow and loaded it into his bow. The guards were horrified, rushing to stop him. Hunting was prohibited in the palace, even animals or humans. Of course, the emperor wouldn't shoot her. A creature with a pretty dress in that garden was not for hunting. The arrow flew, hitting the manure bag next to Hazel. The emperor was pleased, believing it was enough to frighten those under the garden. However, Hazel only noticed the torn fertilizer bag. It was truly a wish come true. Hazel didn't know how to open it with her weak hands. The emperor was quite frustrated because of the news posted in the kingdom's newspaper. A female guard with red hair and sharp teeth was mocking the king, an excellent satire. The emperor asked how that person became close to the people. And that person said that the king should relax, wearing a humble face to ask how to approach the people wouldn't be very effective. The headline "The Conqueror is Conquered" suddenly had the emperor losing a piece of land. Wasn't that too friendly already? The guard with red hair said. The emperor couldn't think of anything else, silently pondering. Meanwhile, two others appeared, one with platinum hair and pointed ears, the other with tousled hair and pointed ears. Don't waste time on that wretch anymore, that speculator will soon be forgotten and gone, one of them said. The cat-eared guard comforted the emperor that news about the garden would soon be replaced by other news. When they stopped caring about that person, she would die of misery. And moreover, with the most confident attitude, the cat-eared guard pointed to the house. She just used a piece of wood to cover the big hole in the roof, so if we just stand still, it will collapse. In a few days, when you wake up, you'll see a desolate piece of land, the cat continued, scratching the tree until it scraped off its bark while he was talking. This made the rest of the crowd angry, shouting to stop him. The cat guard expressed sadness that he couldn't forget the habit of his species, and at the request of the others, he sat down and apologized to the large tree. Another voice appeared, consoling the king, ruling a country is not easy, you will learn more in the future. The young man in black also sat down under the tree and comforted it. I probably need to introduce a few names of these guards, while the king was angry with the words of the black-clad person earlier. Redhead Lewis, a vampire. Kyan, a cat. DC and Iz are two elves, and there's also another elf. They are the knights protecting this country and also the king's assistants in conquests. After joking around enough, the vampire waved his hand, and a group of helmeted guards appeared immediately, declaring that they would deal with the stench of the manure pile in the garden without waiting for the landowner to leave on their own. Meanwhile, Hazel was struggling with the hole in the roof of her house, climbing up there to cover it. With great determination, she thought she would cover the hole with straw. But the old ladder broke immediately. Hazel thought she could use a hammer to nail the ladder back together. But the little girl was too weak to make the nails stick to the ladder. Hazel was exhausted and frustrated, lying on the grass mat and hungry. This morning she woke up early to take the manure out to the garden to bury it under the trees, so she didn't have time to eat anything. Hazel ignored them and continued to think about the manure bag this morning. Luckily, she thought, the arrow came just in time. This morning, she picked up the arrow and examined the arrowhead, with its premium material, shiny, so she used it as a kitchen utensil. On the balcony of the castle, the emperor observed the owner of the special salon, feeling annoyed and curious. She was indeed a cunning land speculator. Not afraid at all. Hazel happily dug up potatoes in her garden, feeling regretful for the high-quality steel arrowhead of the king. The emperor worried that he would be mocked again for not being able to chase a girl. Even Minister Albert had surrendered to her. The emperor thought, since her roof was pierced, she would surely leave. He wished it would rain heavily. Hazel in her vegetable garden was ecstatic about the potatoes, though not as big due to lack of care, they were still plentiful and very nice. Hazel admired them and thought about tonight's dinner with potatoes. She would make crispy pancakes and eat them with cheese and fragrant salad. She would open a bottle of apple wine to commemorate the first complete meal on this farm. Hazel put on her straw hat, grabbed her basket, and ran to find some ingredients for dessert. She ran to the garden near the fountain, where there were many trees like a small forest with various fruits. Hazel found some green apples, which would be used to make a tart. Hazel returned and made the tart first. Hazel was too frightened, dropping her makeshift knife made from an arrowhead and observing them. With their blood-stained cloaks, pale faces like ice, and chilling gazes, they must be one of the 4 knightly orders protecting this kingdom. Hazel bent down to pick up her knife, mustering up the courage to ask, "What are you all doing here?" These were the Holy Flame Knights, commanded by Luis Gallardo, a group of young vampire. After a few seconds without any reaction from them, Hazel picked up her knife and went back to her kitchen work. "Are you here to threaten me?" Well, it's a waste of time. My salon is legally opened, Hazel said as she worked, ignoring the presence of the strangers. Nevertheless, she was very scared of them. Hazel had been working for 2 hours, and the daring knights still persisted in standing there, intending to intimidate the girl with their tall and imposing figures. While Hazel wondered whether they would follow her when she went out to work, she suddenly heard some stomachs growling. She sighed, they were just young people, not allowed to speak to her. Perhaps they hadn't eaten before coming here for their mission this morning. Anyway, they were hungry, and Hazel needed to help them. And so, with their stomachs prompting, the knights reported to their commander, Lewis, that a dining table had appeared before them, accompanied by an invitation from the host. And with that guidance, they enjoyed their meal heartily. The knights even exclaimed, "Yes, absolutely delicious." Lewis pondered, even the most delicious and high-class dishes served by chefs didn't make them happy and eat so much. The commander continued to inquire of his subordinates about what they had eaten. But they didn't know what they had eaten. They only saw her heating and slicing a few pieces of wood. Lewis asked again, "Is she a witch?" No, they could tell, she was just a human, and the pieces of wood she sliced had a meaty smell. However, perhaps those dishes contained some magic, because they couldn't resist its delicious taste. Wow, so the second group of knights wasn't in danger after all? Lewis stood up and returned to discuss disciplinary matters after his return, then immediately left. The remaining guards in the room continued to chatter about the food there, wanting to be stationed there at noon tomorrow. Meanwhile, Lewis approached the house with imaginary images of a witch feeding her prey with magical dishes. Suspicious and angry, the senior knight hurried his steps. But the house was quiet. Everything was neat and clean. On the dining table, there was only a piece of tart left. Lewis pondered how she made it. Why did it taste so amazing? The only way to verify it was to taste it, but after each verification, Lewis's speculation was inconclusive. In the end, his conclusion was simply too delicious. The refreshing taste of the fruit, combined with the sweet tanginess of the applesauce, was exquisite. So, they had become too accustomed to the elaborate dishes of the nobility, to the point of boredom and losing their appreciation for their taste. Therefore, this new and fresh dish was truly amazing. But if only there were coffee, it would be even better. As if granted a wish, the coffee cup was behind the knight, almost causing him to choke, although vampires don't die that way. Engrossed in the delicious food and thoughts of it, Lewis didn't notice Hazel behind him. The invitation was extended in the most solemn manner by the host. "Rest assured, I won't call you a tart thief," Hazel smiled. The aroma was truly unique. After tasting it, Lewis's fierceness was diminished, which he had prepared before coming here. Now the most important thing was the remaining half of the tart and how to finish it. Lewis became annoyed with the communication ban the king had imposed, which prevented him from asking for more tart now. How foolish, Lewis thought, his face eagerly eyeing the plate of tart. With years of experience working at the bank, Hazel understood her customers' psychology well and saw how much they liked her tart. Hazel cheerfully offered her straw hat, saying there was no one here except the hat that could understand her. A perfect solution. Lewis ate it and considered the problem carefully. If he were to chase her away, wouldn't he miss out on such surprises? In other words, he wanted to apologize for the cake theft without asking permission. Hazel exclaimed excitedly, "Is it delicious? Then sit down and finish them." With permission granted, the guest happily finished the tart. A sweet-toothed guest, he especially liked the tart's slight tanginess. These tarts were different, their tartness was fantastic. Hazel explained to Lewis about the apples. Although they were tiny and fell quickly, few paid attention to them, but farmers would try them, finding ways to turn them into the best dishes, eliminating undesirable flavors. For example, this green apple, I would put them in a pan, simmering them over a low flame for a while, then they would be less bitter and more fragrant. Well said, Lewis cheered, I'll call it the unbeatable tart. Because it resembles the indomitable spirit of the farmers, truly admirable. Louis found the tart even better than it was originally, saying he especially liked the apple sauce's flavor. That sauce with vanilla ice cream was amazing, or if spread on toast, it would be delicious for afternoon tea. And even when mixed with carbonated drinks and drunk cold with some biscuits, it would be great. Hazel whispered under her straw hat, "I see you really like sweets." This statement made Louis fall silent again. "That's right, however, I must pretend not to like it." I'll summarize the story of Louis as follows. It's about a girl, a full-fledged vampire, but with extraordinary eating abilities. She became a knight. And some weaker men couldn't defeat her with a sword, so they tried to attack her with words. When they saw Louis eating sweet cakes, they mocked her, saying that a woman couldn't do anything. So Louis had to pretend to dislike sweets and learn to act like a man suitable for a knight's job. Until now, Hazel just knew that the powerful knight was a young girl, and she knew her official name, one of the 4 holy knights commanding the empire, at a very young age, 22. Hazel cheered about the information that one of the 4 knights was a woman. Louis forgot to talk to the hat. She said she wanted Hazel to see her as a neighbor who knows how to use a sword. Hazel covered the straw hat, humorously saying being a neighbor of a straw hat wasn't easy. 2 women, yes, they didn't need any other ducks, their story was interesting enough. Until the bodyguards of the Holy Flame Knights came in and asked what had happened. Louis had to retreat immediately, promising to come back later. That's the second failure. We'll observe the next 3 Holy Knights, Elf, Cat, or the Black Knight, who will be assigned the mission to destroy house number 79. While they played cards, Louis almost only focused on remembering the food and the cuteness of that house. Her dreaminess annoyed the other 3. One of them thought Louis was praising the fresh blood of the neighbor, but the cat said that this afternoon he passed by the land and saw someone eating very delicious tart cakes. They immediately mocked Louis for taking the initiative to deal with the problem and failing. Elf sadly asked if Louis would go there to eat later. It's a big betrayal. They thought Louis fell into the trap of the girl over there because no harmless person would know the law of opening a salon in the royal palace to stay there. Hold on, Louis woke up and thought about the girl. She was very kind and truly didn't understand the laws. The one who came there before Louis, Mr. Albert, was the one who was proficient in the law, knew all the regulations of the Bretagne Empire, and the only person who could figure out the law to own a salon in the royal palace was him. And that special coffee smell, it came from the farm next door. Louis affirmed that when he questioned Minister Albert. They both realized that the food there was delicious, and the owner was not at all concerned about money and fame. It wasn't clear what she liked the most, but she definitely enjoyed gardening. And her rightful claim to the land she had bought meant that no one had the right to evict her. They went to the greenhouse, strolled around, and chatted. Both Mr. Albert and Louis acknowledged that what they truly liked about the place, and wanted it to exist for, was the warm hospitality of the girl, where they could cleanse themselves of fatigue, and it was a happy time every time they were there. So they would keep it there. Louis went home with a relaxed face. She didn't even punish her 2 guards as usual. She even allowed them to decide how to handle yesterday's incident at the small wooden house. What about our main character? Here she is, lying on her small bed, satisfied with today's work. She had been very productive. However, Hazel looked up at the roof, and it still hadn't been repaired. A few rain showers would flood the house and collapse it. But after closing her eyes and turning around a few times, Hazel didn't see the hole in the roof anymore. Like magic, Hazel ran from the attic and outside to check. A figure in black disappeared from the roof. The ladder had been repaired, and a large pile of wood was neatly stacked enough for her to cook to her heart's content. In front of the porch, a red rose was hung there with a note: gratitude from the Knights of Bretagne. That food was delicious. Everything was perfect. This morning, when the emperor woke up, he stretched, stepped out onto the balcony, and looked down. The hole in the roof had disappeared, and it looked even prettier. Why? The emperor was quite curious and angry. He called Louis, who was patrolling in the royal garden, and asked. The emperor asked about the disappearance of the hole, but Louis quickly disappeared after denying any knowledge of it. Later, Hazel went to fetch water for watering the plants. She had to go to the royal garden to get it. 2 hands carrying 2 heavy wooden crates were too much for her. Suddenly, one of the crates became lighter. It was Lewis's hand. He said he would help the Straw Hat carry them back. And with an order from the Holy Knight Lewis, the Holy Flame Knights would not harass her anymore. Lewis even finished the remaining tart cake from yesterday. So there, they quickly became friends. Lewis invited Hazel to join her on Sunday this week. She would buy some cute ribbons, go boating, and have ice cream, seafood, and admire the night view from the tower. But the Straw Hat didn't agree, not because she didn't like those things, but because she needed to plow some areas in the garden. And Lewis's carefully written invitation was rejected by a farmer. The knight had to come and help her plow the land for planting over the weekend. The emperor stood talking to Lewis, full of anger. "Do you intend to mock me by going to her side?" But Lewis denied that, nor any girl. If the emperor saw a girl that no one else could see and was talking to her, perhaps he should see a doctor. She said and coldly walked away in her usual style, leaving the emperor even more frustrated and helpless. He stood alone and began to think about this. While not a big deal, it showed the difference between the policies of the previous king, his predecessor. If this happened, then maybe he would have flattened that land, driven out those who dared to oppose him in tears and blood. Even his money would have been taken by the royal guards. Now, the young emperor wants peace and stability for the people. He wants the people to be free and happy. However, he cannot accept someone taking advantage of the king's goodwill for their own benefit. The emperor still felt annoyed by that girl. She really made him pay attention. Why did she refuse to sell the land to the king? Wasn't it to make a profit or something? He muttered the name of that villain, Mayfield. Early on Sunday morning, some noble ladies were strolling around the royal flower garden. They were very surprised by the casual attire of the famous Holy Knight Lewis, who was always cold and strict. The Straw Hat was waiting for her. Lewis took off her glasses. Oh, she wasn't alone. Her subordinates were there too, following Lewis's orders. They chatted and felt uncomfortable having to use a straw hat to indirectly converse to avoid the banned things in the palace. The Holy Knights eagerly walked to their battlefield on the other side of the fence. Suddenly they were caught by the cat and the Black Knight. What devilry is happening? The 2 senior knights look at the group of farmers in front of them and ask. Lewis reassures her subordinates, and approaches the cat to talk. He is very angry and confused. They threaten Lewis that if Laurendale sees this outfit, he will laugh at Lewis to death. He will remember it for a long time, and a fairy could live for hundreds of years and still tell the funny story of him. Just as they interrogate Lewis and haven't received an answer yet, a branch angrily falls on the head of the cat. No, I'm just kidding. It's a branch from the 500-year-old tree, considered a national treasure of the country. And the cat could be accused of damaging it because he was standing closest to it at the time. According to a newly added law, national treasures, if damaged, the higher the position of the person, the heavier the punishment. And the cat will be stripped of his position as a high-ranking knight in the Holy Wind Knight Order. He just touched the tree that was conferred the title of general. Wow, it's a serious matter. What should we do? No, what should they do? Fix it. The ruggedly handsome dark-haired knight thinks of the smartest solution. But perhaps no one has ever fixed a living tree. Laurendale, maybe an elf can heal it, but if he says that, he will kick them out, and he can't lie to help them conceal this matter. Wait, they need someone knowledgeable about trees. All 3 have come to the owner of Marienmere Farm. They explained the condition of General Leonard Maximus Reutenberg, were also known as National Treasure number 354 of this empire. With 500 years of wind and mist, it has been used by kings and knights of the National Head Council as a mascot. The cat feels scared and confesses to scratching the tree and causing it to get sick. All 3 knights try to justify that they have taken good care of that tree. However, in the end, the Black Knight Siegwald also said seriously that the tree was too old and sick. According to regulations, Knight Cat Kyan will be dismissed, and they need to treat it. And they don't know anything about trees. Hazel, of course, agrees. She says she has treated a tree before. The three knights cheer. It would be great if she could protect a vampire, a cat, and a black bear knight. Hazel touches the trunk of the tree, feeling and observing it. There are black marks in some places, the leaves have turned yellow, and some parts have turned black. Its condition is more serious than Hazel thought. But Hazel doesn't have any tools in her hand right now. She requests a small knife, 5 bottles of golden wine, alcohol, and a clean piece of cloth. 10 minutes later, everything is ready.